So today we're going to kind of do a little overview of a new workshop topic that we have to offer. It is NoSQL using MongoDB. We're really excited to be able to add this to our library of topics. And I have asked Chris Grabowski to join us. He is the creator of this topic and also works for MongoDB. So I thought it'd be great if we could kind of co-chat about what this topic is all about. So
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, my name is Chris Grabowski. I'm a solutions architect at MongoDB in the Philadelphia area. So even though I work for MongoDB, all the views in this are expressed as my own. That being said, this is a workshop we do regularly with anyone in the field doing MongoDB. Adults, developers, database administrators. So it's a great opportunity to start learning not just MongoDB, but databases in general.
Yeah, and that's really great. We love to try to offer the girls actual software to play around with that is being used in the real world.
And they can get started for free, which is great.
Right, exactly. So thank you, MongoDB, for that. All right, so let's jump into it. We have our workshop description here that is also listed on our workshop plan, as always. So for interested instructors, they can read about that and also see how we kind of came up with the idea to create a NoSQL workshop plan, because we already had a SQL one in our library of topics. So to have that diversity. Chris, do you want to kind of give just like a brief overview of what this workshop is about?
Yeah, so NoSQL databases are pretty much a modern way of storing information. So the SQL side kind of looks at things like a bunch of series of Excel tables, if you will, a bunch of Excel worksheets. This is a bit different in that you store information in a much more intuitive way, especially for developers. Right. So it's very easy for the girls to get up and running, see exactly what's going on, and immediately start building applications, basically.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. Thank you. And then we decided once we created this curriculum that it would be best suited as a 2-star topic for our instructor difficulty level, which is an intermediate. Why do you think it makes sense for this topic to be more of an intermediate level?
So there are a lot of intricacies in databases in general. This one hides most of it. There's a little bit of setup work, which we'll talk about in a moment. That's not too difficult. It's all web-based. However, the terminology, there is a lot of terminology, and the biggest challenge typically for instructors is being able to take that terminology and make it relatable to the young kids, right? So, it's not a difficult concept, but the communication skill is really where it's going to come into play.
Definitely. And you would agree that it's important that obviously if someone's interested and has even a little bit of background in this, really taking time to dive into MongoDB and play around with the software, right?
So absolutely, they should run through the whole workshop start to finish by themselves at least once. Yeah. It's, again, not difficult, but there are basic, even if you don't know databases, a baseline in computer science of knowing what data types are, how to graph things, X, Y axis, those sort of things. So nothing too difficult, but just being able to communicate it well and follow up on questions and get people involved if you need to ask new questions that are not necessarily in the workshop.
Right, definitely. Super helpful. Thank you. We always like to make sure we're pointing out the materials needed to run this workshop, as well as the best way to set up the workshop prior to and day of, those things to think of. Those are really important pieces to our workshop plans because it ensures you that you have everything you need. You run through the lesson like Chris suggested, and you should have no problem day of. Of course, with technology, there can always be some slight problems, but we hope that's not the case. So we want to look at our materials first. It's great because this workshop doesn't require a ton of materials. All of it is free, of course. Some of the materials that stand out the most that are different from other workshop plans are that they need the MongoDB Atlas, of course, since this is a Mongo workshop. Chris, could you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So MongoDB Atlas is the cloud-based offering of MongoDB. So your options, basically, if you wanted to do this, would be you could go download our software. It is open source and start running it if you want. Obviously, that has difficulty, not just for the students, but for the instructor. So Atlas is basically go into a web interface, no credit card necessary, just sign up for an account, and you can deploy what's called a free tier, which is more than enough for 20 plus kids to be able to share simultaneously.
Yeah. That's so helpful too, and especially because I love how, in the notes here we have that it could run on a PC, a Mac, or Chromebook. And I would say in some other topics we have, some software is very specific to a computer type. So it's nice that something web-based, when possible to use, can be offered, because many computers are out there and being brought in if the girls are bringing their own. Obviously, having Google Chrome, it seems that the Mongo cloud base works best on Google Chrome is what you would suggest?
Yeah, any modern web browser, Chrome works great. Edge, Safari, Firefox, they all work. So if they're running a Chromebook, that's fine. If they're running a Mac and don't want to install anything but Safari, that's fine. Right. If they got a PC, Windows box, and just want to use Edge, that's fine. We've tested all of those, so you should be fine. I used Chrome.
Okay. Perfect. And then the last thing I would say is different for this is Chris helped us put together an instructor setup for the activity, how to actually go into MongoDB Atlas and set up this workshop plan before the day of. So that is also a part of our prior to the workshop, what you should do. And Chris really gave great options as to the best way to go about this. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about how you decided to set up the MongoDB accounts?
Sure. So we'll get into what the workshop looks like in a moment, but at a high level, it's going to basically encourage the girls to type certain things into MongoDB to make the type of queries that you're going to be doing. So the options for that is everyone needs access to MongoDB Atlas. So we recommend, at least after the workshop, everyone, all the parents can sign up for MongoDB Atlas, and the girls can continue on their own after the fact. But having that as a upfront requirement can be challenging. So the way I wrote the setup for the activity is basically the instructor will sign up for an account using their own personal email address, or they can go just sign up for a real quick Outlook.com or Gmail account just for this activity. They create an account on MongoDB Atlas, which is completely free. They deploy what's called an M0, which again is the free tier. It's completely free, and no credit card has to be put in or anything like that up front. Awesome. After that's done, you do a couple more steps, and then the day of the activity, you just have everyone open that web browser, go to cloud.mongodb.com, and sign in with the account you made ahead of time. And that way, everyone's on the same thing, seeing the same thing. And it's usually the fastest way to get up and running.
Yeah, I would agree. In other workshops we have too, it's kind of helps make sure we don't run into any snags if a student didn't create one and they need an email address to do so or whatever. It's just helpful to have that option. But I do love that you stressed having them create one with their parents when they get home, because that's really what we want to make sure is they can continue practicing what they learned at home as well. And then obviously we have our presentation slides that are very detailed and walk through every activity of this workshop plan. Sometimes it may be a good idea to think about printing those presentation slides, or at least the ones that could maybe help keep the girls on track while they're running through the lesson. So next we have business as usual. We always want to make sure that our workshop plan notes to do introductions with the girls and do an icebreaker. This really allows everyone in the room to get to know each other, the instructors, TAs, to kind of tell them a little bit about themselves, what their job is, what their career is, and then also open it up for the girls as a great way to kind of get them talking and feel more comfortable in the room. So that way when you're jumping into activities later, they will more likely participate and kind of feel more comfortable. And doing an icebreaker too, just to kind of break up the nerves in the room is important too. And we have examples of icebreakers you could do in the workshop plan. So you could take a look at them, or if you have other great ideas yourself or from the internet, please use them. I think it's really important to relate each of our topics to career opportunities out there. It's great to make what we're teaching the girls relatable. And so they could see like, hey, if I'm really into this right now, I should really try to look into these potential careers that would work with what this topic is focusing on. So Chris, you put together a great list of jobs that use MongoDB skills. And if you want to briefly just kind of talk about each and how it relates to those specific careers, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So by no means is this an exhaustive list of what you can do with these sort of skills. However, common titles I deal with on a regular basis involve these sort of things. So if you need to write mobile applications, there's basically two ways to do it, right? You could always require a cell signal or Wi-Fi signal, or you can make sure that it works even if you are offline. So MongoDB has ways to write mobile applications that allow you to move offline. So a lot of people around the entire globe, their primary computer or only computer is a mobile device. So this is a huge market in today, and it's only growing. So mobile app development is huge. DBA is a database administrator. So this is a title where typically the people will administer the databases, right? So make sure everything's up and running. Who's allowed to have access is allowed to have access. Focus on security and operations. So this title is true for regardless of what database you run. MongoDB is one of many. But again, it's a great career path. And that's actually one of the things I went to school for.
Very cool.
Data scientist is a huge emerging field right now. More information is created, right now than basically all of the history before.
Right.
So making sense of that is what's important. It's very easy to record data. Making use of it is critically important. So you could go into something like, I've got customers in genomics. So they've got very noble cause of trying to wipe out things like cancer within 2 generations. And the way you do that is with it by studying the data. Right. So this is a huge field and it's very interesting, and there's a lot of growth in this right now. And the last one, which usually appeals to most younger kids, is game developer. So for example, it's one thing to just have a single player game, but then if you play multiplayer or need to store your high scores or anything like that, you're going to need a database to put it in. And one of the things MongoDB is really good at is high performance and putting that data all over the world. So regardless of where the people playing the game are, they're close to it. So these are just a quick snapshot of some of the jobs that MongoDB skills are used in that I deal with regularly. But obviously there's tons more.
Right. Yeah. And whoever ends up being interested in running this topic out of our volunteer instructors, they could always add to this list as well before they present it. And that's what we want them to do. Add more information they have. Yeah. All right. So next we want to really jump into what the instructor will be talking about and what the students will be doing. This is going to be a brief overview of each part, just to give you a better idea of what we mean with the information we're giving you in the workshop plan and the slideshow. I started off by adding an icon for which parts of the workshop are more lecture-based. We like to try to keep lecture portions minimal, so like 20% of the workshop, and we did a really great job of doing that here. So you can see where the arrows are pointing. That's where a lot more discussion is happening and explanations from the instructor. So Chris, could you talk a little bit about, let's talk about part 1 first. What is the overview of what you're trying to present to the girls during this part of the workshop?
Sure. So unfortunately, we do have to kind of lay a little bit of a baseline before we can get hands-on and actually hands-on keyboard. So the purpose of section 1, so taking a step back there, this workshop's available, the one we're talking about. There's also another one which focuses on SQL, structured query language. This one's NoSQL, which just means not SQL, right? It's a different way of doing things. So part of the beginning is just laying out both of those. Part of that will drive possible attendance to the other one, if that's something the girls want to do. But it also just, again, lays the foundation of what's out there in the world. So after that, we kind of shift gears to MongoDB specifically, to focus on the terminology that we'll be using the rest of the day. So we do set the baseline there. So that's really the purpose of part 1. There are questions in there to try to make it as interactive as possible.
Of course.
Draw some things out. You're welcome to modify it slightly to try to drive more participation. But the minimum there is to kind of baseline for the rest of the afternoon.
So part 2 in this, same thing. we're having some lecture, but then we start to dive into allowing the girls to get into MongoDB and start being more hands-on with the software. And then that continues on throughout the rest of our sections in this workshop. So they're getting a lot of opportunity to be in that software and be able to learn the best way, I think, which is doing it, following along with the instructor and then actually getting to do it.
So the focus here at the beginning is on what's called CRUD, which is the heart of any application you write. Any application you write will have to create records in a database, read records out of a database, update records, and delete records. So this will be a hands-on part. So kind of like a slide on what the C in CRUD stands for, and then let's do it all together, hands-on. So I can give you a quick demonstration of that if you want.
Okay, great.
Okay, so at this point, I've hopped over to MongoDB Atlas, which is at cloud.mongodb.com. So this is the cluster that the instructor would have set up ahead of time. So quick overview if you want to see how to do that, even though it's in the documentation. Basically, you create your free account, which we'll skip, which is just registering an email. After that, you click Build a Cluster. So to cut over to kind of exactly what that would be on the instructor side, you would sign up for a free account. You just enter your email address, and you'll be taken to a page like this where you click Build a Cluster. Basically, on the left, you pick your free cluster, and that way you won't have to type in a credit card or anything. Anything here, you could basically leave default. So I live in New Jersey, so I'm good with Virginia. If you are giving this lecture on the West Coast, it's probably better to choose Oregon or something like that, just so that way it's a little bit closer to you. We're going to, by default, deploy in AWS, completely fine. If you're a big fan of Google or Microsoft, you could pick the others. They all still have free tiers. After that, that's all you have to do. If you want to do something more advanced, like name the cluster, this is what the students will see. So then you click Create Cluster. After that's done, it'll take 5 minutes to deploy. Even though it is quick, we recommend at least doing this the night before. That way you don't have to do it and watch progress bars while the kids are doing it.
Definitely, that's a good tip.
Once it's deployed, it's going to look something like this. The only other step you have to do is load the sample data set. This will give something, kind of a baseline that we'll use through the whole exercise. And again, that's as simple as clicking the ... here, load sample data set. That will take, again, another 5 minutes. And then everything is prepped. That's all we have to prep ahead of time. So digging into kind of what the kids will be doing, if you click the Collections tab, that's going to allow us to explore everything, the data, the sample data we just loaded. What I really like is the sample data is representative of things that the girls will know ahead of time. So the entire setup is built on what's called sample mflix. So that's the kind of like a movies database like imdb.com or Netflix.
Yeah.
And almost all activities are going to be on the sample mflix database movies collection. So for CRUD activities, create is basically inserting a document. You give, you let the kids be creative here. They can create their own, my great movie, give the title of whatever they want. Obviously, there's a bit more advanced that will go into the slides. We'll skip that though. The reading is similarly, we're issuing queries to get data back out of the database. I'll just use my favorite movie of Ghostbusters, right? And we'll find that movie, right? Updates are basically the same thing, except you click the pencil, and now I can update any value within here. And deletes is just as easy, where you press the trash can. So that's kind of the basic of the CRUD. After that, we're going to try to drive it more interactive, where we've got a series of kind of Jeopardy games, if you will, where we will give the answer, which is the MongoDB query. So it might be something like year 1998 or something like that. We encourage the kids to type this in here, so you'll guide them in that process. When we run this, obviously, this is going to give us a result, and they're going to try to figure out what that query means. And then the way you play Jeopardy, right, is you would say, what are movies created, released in 1998 would be right. And it does get a bit more advanced, but it kind of builds upon each step. It's a good activity and gets people typing and thinking.
Definitely, yeah. The girls seem to have a lot of fun with that. And adding anything in as kind of a game aspect, obviously they get even more excited about it. So I love the Jeopardy style.
Anything more than that is kind of more of the advanced things. So in the aggregations, we'll go into a bit more of that, which again is more Jeopardy with a little bit of explanation up front that allows you to kind of manipulate the data. So if you want to find how, how many movies came out, or sorry, were filmed in different countries, we'll
Right.
walk through how to calculate that in real time, or, see how old movies are by, taking the current year and subtracting the year the movie came out. So this aggregations is kind of a way to manipulate the data and build reports, if you will. And again, after you do the activity in the slide itself, there's room for the girls to try to make their own next step and continue the process.
Yeah, I remember during the workshop too, if the girls are feeling comfortable, being able to kind of come up and lead their own, give an answer, and have the rest of the attendees find that question.
So the last part of the lab that's really interesting is kind of gets on the creative side, which is we've got all this data. How do we make sense of it? So that kind of goes to the data science I was mentioning earlier. And some of the easiest ways to visualize that is with graphs. So these are some samples of using MongoDB charts. Again, no extra work ahead of time. It's basically a feature. You just click the charts button on the left. So obviously I've been making quite a few charts here, but what we'll do together is each student will be able to make their own dashboard and make their own charts within it. So it's kind of their own little playground. So the way you make the chart is pretty straightforward. You just click the add chart button. You choose the movies database here. And then everything else is drag and drop. So I forget exactly which ones it says to use, but we could do drag and drop the who was in the movie, which is cast, along with what year the movie came out, right? And we'll make a interesting graph here of who was in what movie or something like that. There we go. So let's look at the top 10 actors or something like that. So you can see here, I built a real quick graph. It guides you through this entire process. And then obviously after you build the first one, that's the opportunity for the students to be able to make their own after the fact.
Yeah, and I know the girls love this part too, that really visual aspect and being able to decide how they want to represent their data visually. They had a lot of fun playing around with the different types of charting and the way that they could have that shown. And then I love how you suggested in the workshop plan as well that they could work together with a partner during this part, which is always really fun to kind of partner up and work on something. And then we always love when we work on projects, if we have time for them to share either with another partner group or, depending on the size of the workshop, they could present it to everyone. So that's always a lot of fun. That was a great way to kind of visualize what you're doing with the students during each of those hand-on portions of the workshop. And then really just like the end of any workshop, you want to make sure that you're following up with any Q&A that the students may have. If they're getting stuck with anything, make sure to have that time so when they're independently or with a partner working on the charts portion of the workshop, obviously the instructor and TAs being available to answer any questions they may have or overall any questions they have about MongoDB. Before we close, we love to be able to have the students answer a survey. This allows the students to get a certificate of completion stating the topic that they just completed, which is a great way to kind of keep track of all the workshops they did, but also allows us to know how they thought the workshop went, what we could maybe improve, and just overall their experience. So you always want to make sure that there's time to do that at the end of the workshop. And lastly, for the purpose of this overview video, we want to just add other information here that you could refer to. As we already know, and Chris so graciously joined our video today, he was the TechShopz developer for this topic, so his information is here, as well as he listed some really helpful MongoDB resources. They are also listed on the workshop plan, so you can be sure to see them, as well as they're listed on the slideshow for students to be able to refer to at a later time when they're playing around with this at home as well. And working on something else fun in MongoDB. And then we also added some related TechShopz that are currently in our library that if you ran this one and you really had a fun time leading it, these may be other workshop topics you want to take a look at and see if you're interested in leading in the future.
This is a great workshop to get rolling. The follow-up workshops look great too. So if the student was really interested in databases, the SQL one is a good next step as well, so you can do the compare contrast. Again, in data science or app development, Python is a huge programming language. So even if you don't want to get into application development long term, and maybe you want to do data science or something else, Python is just a great English language, and it's very easy to then map that or connect that to MongoDB, as well as GIS. As you saw a moment ago, there's ways to do GIS queries within MongoDB and build those graphs.
Yeah.
And then, GIS is also just a really cool topic in general. So these are great follow-ups. So encouraging them to participate will be great.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Chris, for not only creating this content for us to be able to bring to our tech girls, but also being able to explain kind of an overview of this topic for future instructors.
Absolutely. It was great to build this. I'm happy to work with your team. And it was great giving this first presentation and watching the girls develop some really cool stuff and hopefully an interest in computer science going forward.
Yeah, definitely. That is the goal. Awesome.